Hello and welcome back to Buzz TV. My name is Brian Race. I'm your co-host for this live stream that is for you, for beekeepers everywhere. We were just so thrilled last week that we had friends that were watching from New York City of all places, Houston. Let's see, we also saw Orlando show up on our analytics map. And of course, our good friends in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee. No matter where you're checking us out, we're just grateful to have you here. And I do want to mention there's multiple ways that people can access Buzz TV. Mountain Sweet Honey is our sponsor, but also at mountainsweethoney.com, you've got the ability to catch the live stream. We're doing the same on our YouTube channel. That's the YouTube channel for Mountain Sweet Honey, as well as Facebook. And the cool thing there is those shows are archived. So once we finish, we save those broadcasts so that you can share them with a friend or go back and catch a segment that you really enjoyed and wanted to watch again. I do encourage you to stay with us through the entire program tonight. We're giving away packaged bees. Would you like to win that? Well, we've got your opportunity. We'll tell you how to do that as the evening progresses. Also, Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Everybody's talking about Black Friday deals and Cyber Monday specials. We've got them for you. Are you looking to replenish some of your special items that you use as a part of being a beekeeper? Well, we think it's going to be some of the best deals of the year. Don't want you to miss out on that. That will be at 9 a.m. on Black Friday, and then that following Monday, 9 a.m. as well. Maybe make a notation somewhere to come back and watch so that you can get some of that special savings. Now, we do have an interview coming up with Bobby Chaisson. He's a master beekeeper with Georgia Bee Removal. Has somebody ever called you up on the phone because they know you're a beekeeper and they're saying, I've got bees in my house, or my neighbor's got a swarm of bees in the shed. How do we get these bees out of here? That's what Bobby does for a living. So you're going to learn some things during that interview that is coming up. But hey, I've talked enough. It is time to turn it over to the host of the show. Here is Ray Sivitz. Hey, Ray.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, let's take a moment and talk about what you can expect from Buzz TV. Our program is approximately 1 hour, not too long, not too short. It's all about beekeeping, not about chickens, not about cows, although I do have cows. We are about becoming better beekeepers. We are about making beekeeping enjoyable. We want to hear from you, our viewer. You can email us at buzztv@mountainsweethoney.com. Aubrey is right now manning that email account, and she will be passing on your questions during our question and answer time later. Now, let's talk about tonight's show. We have a flash sale, Hive Alive pollen patties. Super great deal on these pollen patties. And as you all know, this is the time to start feeding your bees. So we'll be giving more details on that in a few minutes. Also, we've got an update on our Beekeeper Boot Camp. That's a pay-per-view video that is on our website. Folks, this is a 4-hour recording that we did on our boot camp just a few weeks ago, and we're going to be talking more about that. As Brian mentioned, Bobby Chaisson's here with us today, and if you didn't know, Bobby's been on HLN and ABC being interviewed, and he is the master beekeeper, as Brian mentioned. We're also going to talk about carniolan honeybee traits. And I get a lot of questions on carniolans, and we've been selling carniolan bees for, I'd say 6 years or so. And some pretty nice traits when we're discussing the carniolans, and that is yet to come too. We also have the Ask Ray segment, and you all have really enjoyed having your questions and hearing my answers. So write your questions, buzztv@mountainsweethoney.com. And we're going to be offering Italian packaged bees as a giveaway if you go on to YouTube and simply subscribe to Mountain Sweet Honey and drop a message, free bees, and that will get you in the running for that package of bees. All right, so you know how to win those free bees this evening. We will announce the winner on our next show, which is Black Friday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, November the 25th. but you cannot win if you don't enter. So subscribe to Mountain Sweet Honey on our YouTube channel, and in the comments section, type freebies, and then you're in the running for this giveaway.
All right, my friend, I've got to jump in here. You've been teasing what's happening Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Can you give me something specific?
Well, let me tell you, Brian, because you're kind of new to this with Mountain Sweet Honey.
Well, I've got this big list. I'm a new beekeeper. I'm not only new at Mountain Sweet Honey, I'm a new beekeeper, and I've got this checklist of things that I need, and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to get what I need at a good price with these sales.
Well, you need to come with a list on Friday and on Monday. There's no doubt about it. We're going to have
and there's no employee discount, which is why I'm asking about how to take advantage of the deal.
But there's going to be bargains, real bargains that we're going to be offering during this time.
Quality stuff, not used T-shirts or leftover T-shirts from vendors or things that are no longer in use or being supported.
This is stuff that every beekeeper uses every time they go to the bee yard. Everything from protective clothing to tools, to hives, to hive stands. So that whole spectrum. We even have books that we're going to be running specials on, educational books on Friday. So
Lord knows I need those.
Yes, you need to go to school.
Yes,
you do.
I think what's going to be fun about Friday is, thinking back to my grandmother, she'd get up at 4 o'clock on Good Friday, get her hair all gussied up to head down to Macy's to make sure she was first in line. Now, she wasn't on any of the Walmart videos where it's just the crowds like we see today.
She was carrying the gun.
Yeah. That was my grandmother. Yes, fun lady. But my point is, things have changed. Yes. We get up on Black Friday, we get our coffee going, we fire up the laptop, we see who's running some really good deals. So can you at least share one of those really good deals that people will be able to get?
All right. Let's talk about hive smokers. All of us use smokers every time we go to our inspection of the hive. You look on our website right now
at mountainsweethoney.com.
Let me look down here, and all right, we have them at $32, Brian. One day, Friday till we sell out.
Okay.
$17.99.
Almost cut in half.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. That's one of our many deals that we've got going on Black Friday.
Now, is that type of savings going to be reflected on a lot of other items? I mean, is this the type of thing where people could save up to 50% on items?
There is significant discounts on everything that we'll be having on Black Friday and Cyber Monday.
Okay.
So,
well, I'll be here, and hope you guys will as well. It's going to be a fun morning. And then, of course, we'll do it all over again on that Monday.
Brian, bring your list.
I've got a big one.
All right. Before I introduce Bobby Chaisson, Bobby, we've scoured the internet and we found a video.
Uh-oh.
So, Brian, you found it. Let's roll it.
Oh, my God. Bees, millions of bees. Air search 2-8 to base. Bees, millions of bees.
Bees?
Yes, they're all around me now. All over the canopy, trying to get in.
Well, get above them, man. Take it up.
I can't, sir. I am losing power.
We dug into the archives for that one, didn't we? Nice job, Kurt. Yeah, they were swarming, though, in Times Square, similar to that 1978 film, The Swarm. More than 40,000 bees descended upon a hot dog stand. This was Tuesday, middle of New York City. Look at them there. It was just as frightening. It's on that umbrella there. Shut down the street, by the way. They ended up being vacuumed out of there. They're taken to a new home in Long Island.
The colony has outgrown wherever they're living. So they, just like we do, we're looking for a new home. So about half the colonies and the queen will leave, and they've got to group back up together. So that's what they're doing there, landing on the umbrella. They're kind of grouping there until they can get everybody together and then decide where they're going to go from there to a new home. just so happens those guys were able to get them into a new bee box.
And so they use the vacuum there. Is that the norm for something like a situation like that?
For a situation like that where they're all spread out over the top of the umbrella, definitely a vacuum works really easy. They've got vacuums that are specifically designed just to vacuum up bees like that. So it works really well. A lot of times in our areas, they'll land on a branch and something like that, and they'll kind of group up in a ball, so to speak, and you can call a beekeeper and shake them off in a box and take them home.
And is that unusual? For, again, middle of a city like that for you to
Not at all.
No,
not at all. You'd be really surprised how many beekeepers there are in a metropolitan area, especially here in Atlanta. There's several hundred inside the perimeter, and that's not counting all what we call feral colonies of bees that are just living out in houses or trees or all kinds of structures. So there's quite a few around.
Tell us about your job. My guess is you get stung a few times a day?
Just a few times. It's kind of a regular
occurrence. How'd you get into it?
Actually, I grew up in the house, and it had bees in the wall of the house, so I always had an interest in it. Read a little bit, studied some, and managed to get a couple of colonies to start out with, and 2 turned into 4, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, ever fearful when you come upon a scene and a swarm and a hive, and are you all like, okay?
No, bees are actually so gentle. It's really amazing how gentle honeybees are. I think everybody equates getting stung to a wasp or a yellow jacket or something like that. Honeybees, they're wanting to make honey and hang out.
Okay.
The bees that we keep around here are super gentle and super great.
Thanks for coming on. Bobby
Absolutely.
Chaisson, our bee expert, helping us kind of better understanding what went on there in Times Square.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Good
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Well, Bobby, what kind of experience was that?
Oh, it was amazing. Of course, that was an interview down in Atlanta, and it's always fun to be able to just talk to folks about bees and explain experiences and what's going on with them. They're just such a fascinating little insect, and it's just great to talk and educate people about them.
What was that experience like doing it there at HLN?
Oh, wow. I mean, it was really neat. It was interesting to me to be able to see, behind the scenes and how all that kind of stuff gets put together. And then just to be on the TV and be nationally syndicated. I had folks calling me from all over the country that know me and were like, oh man, I saw you on TV. So it was a lot of fun to be able to, get that information out and an accurate information out to folks.
Sure. And you were on ABC too, if I'm correct.
Oh God, I've been kind of several different places. It's hard to keep up with them now, but yeah, I've been interviewed several different ways.
Well, I want to introduce Bobby to our audience here. He has quite a resume. I've known him for 7 or 8 years, and he is a master beekeeper. He has also achieved the Beekeeper of the Year for the state of Georgia. And Bobby also serves as the director of the Georgia Beekeepers Association and is also the president of the Tri-County Beekeepers Association. So, Bobby, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me, Ray. I appreciate it.
Well, Bobby, tell me a little bit about your business, Georgia Bee Removal.
So Georgia Bee Removal is probably one of the oldest and most established bee removal companies in the state. We travel pretty much all of the Southeast. I think the only state that we haven't been to is Florida around us. But we provide bee removal services for residential and commercial structures and relocate the bees alive and relocate them back into a proper beehive. And then we donate them out to different clubs after a year or so of keeping them. So, we're been around for quite a while and provide a great service for folks that have houses and businesses that want to keep the bees alive and keep them healthy.
Now, Bill Owens is still owns Georgia Bee Removal.
Absolutely.
Well, folks, this is where I got started, was with Bill Owens teaching a class at a technical school. And he had about 8 weeks of teaching. And that's where I got the stinger. Is I wanted to become a beekeeper. At first, I was a little withdrawn. And the more he talked, the more I said, hey, this is interesting. So tell Bill I said hello.
I definitely will.
Well, tell us a little bit now, Bobby, about the removal of bees from structures. How do you guys do that? And, tell us the step-by-step on that.
Well, step-by-step. So, I think one of the biggest things, and the first step, of course, is a kind of a consultation with a customer, so to speak. I've got a fantastic lady in the office that takes our phone calls and really knows all the questions to ask to establish whether it is honeybees or not. So we kind of try to figure out where they're located in the house and get them on the schedule, and we go out there. And the day that I'm there is the day that they're actually going to get removed from the house.
So you go from consultation into let's get the job done once the homeowner goes through that step-by-step process of what you're going to do.
Absolutely. Pat at the office does a great job explaining the whole process and what we're going to do. I think with us, we have been around so long and we've done so many bee removals. I mean, personally, I've done over 2,000 live bee removals from structures. So
over how many years would that be, Bobby?
God, probably 8 or 9 now. So I typically do about 150 or 200 removals a year.
And when does that season typically start for you, where you hear the phones starting to ring?
Depending on the weather in our area, typically we'll start mid to late February. March will get picked up really good, but April, May, and June are just as many as we can get to.
Well, great. So you go from the consultation and getting the job done.
Sure.
And now getting the job done, what kind of things have you run into with getting it done?
Oh, I have run into everything from brand new colonies that have just moved in that might take you 45 minutes to an hour to remove, to one of the largest ones I've ever removed was about 25 feet long in the ceiling of somebody's dining room. Yeah, that they had thought they'd only been there for a few months. And when we showed up, they were quite large. It took us about half a day to even get everything out and get it all squared away. It was rather large, but if you can imagine it with bees, I've probably seen it. They've been everywhere in structures and commercial buildings and, everywhere that you could possibly think.
Now, we have some pictures that you've brought.
Certainly.
And Brian, why don't we throw up one of the pictures here for Bobby to talk about?
Yeah, Ray. So this is a basic colony that has moved in basically in the top of a bay window, which is not terribly uncommon, but not a really common spot. And the interesting part about this, most of the time when they move into a bay window, they'll be on the edges or beside the house. But this colony decided to go in between the shingles in the gutter and went into the center of the bay window. So it's a kind of a normal bee removal for us. We come out there, we'll take the shingles off of the roof, pull up the plywood, and as you can see, the bees are right there. Vacuum all the bees up, remove the honeycomb, and then we fill the space back in with some new insulation, put everything back together, put the shingles back down. You never even know we were there.
Not many extraction companies do the repair work afterwards. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the few things that does set us apart from a lot of people. There are a few that will put everything back together, but we pride ourselves on the fact that once we are done, basically the only thing, if they have to, that a customer will have to do is some minor painting. And that also allows us to give the customer a guarantee that once we've done the bee removal, we can guarantee, because we put it back together and we can ensure the bees can't get back in there. So we give them a 5-year guarantee that the bees won't come back to that same spot that we removed them from.
Now, I get this question a lot, so I'm going to let the expert answer. I know what the answer is, but when you get in there with all the bees flying around and everything, you got to get the queen. Am I correct?
It is pretty important to find her. It's not, depending on the time of the year, it's not complete death to the colony, because as you know, through beekeeping practices, we can do some stuff once we get them back to the bee yard so they can raise another queen. But by the way that we do the bee removals, about 90% of the time I am able to put my eyes on the queen and catch her. A lot of the other times I end up inadvertently vacuuming her up, but normally we do find her. And it is obviously, for the survival of the colony, best to find the queen while you're doing the removal. And, after you do a lot of them, it becomes pretty easy to find her.
Very good. Brian, let's go to the next slide.
So, Ray, this one is actually a colony that has moved into the floor of a house. This was kind of interesting because this was kind of an upstairs stowed away closet.
A second floor then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically they were between the first and second floor, which is very common, especially here in Georgia, because there's no insulation between the floors. And we get a call all the time. Bees are in my wall. Oh my goodness, bees are in the wall. And I would say almost 100% of the time that they're actually between the floors because it's a wide open space. And it surprisingly is almost the same size as a regular beehive. But these were going in kind of at a corner of a house and were accessing the space between the two floors
Sure.
by a little bitty hole. And it literally takes a hole about the size of a pencil for the bees to get into. And once they move in, they do exactly what you see. They'll build their comb in there and just make their house.
So when we're looking at joists that are going across and those stabilizers,
Yep.
if they weren't cut correctly and squared, they're going to have a gap.
Correct.
And that's where the bees can expand in months and years to come. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see that more commonly now, where you have engineered trusses.
Yes.
Where typically we don't see it with like standard lumber, standard 1x10s, 1x12 floor joists. Where I see that commonly where they continue past that purling board is those engineered trusses. They look like I-beams made out of wood.
Yes.
And that always leaves a space for bees to go around it. And I've seen them get pretty big, but majority of the time they're 3 or 4 feet long, and that's about all the bees can manage.
So with this one here, did you go up through the ceiling or down through the floor to this?
So
colony?
that's actually a good common question that we always get is, how to get to them. And this one we actually went down through from above them. So we went through the floor. And a couple of reasons for that is with this particular one, because it was in a closet, we could go in there in that closet and cut it, the subfloor, so to speak, right on top of the floor joist, pull that piece of wood up. Of course, it's in a closet. Nobody's ever going to see it again. But also, if it had been out in a room where there was carpet, we could pull the carpet back, do the same thing. Then when we're done and we put the carpet back down, you never see it. If we were to go through a ceiling, of course, the homeowner would have to sand and repaint the ceiling. So you would see that.
Yes.
So we try to go through the floor if we're able to.
Very good. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, so this one is pretty interesting. These folks at this house had an outdoor porch, and they had decided to enclose the bottom of it, which of course is just like a ceiling.
Now, how far off the ground was that?
I want to say this was about 8 or 10 feet off the ground,
Okay.
so within
All right.
relative ladder distance.
Okay.
It wasn't too terribly high, but they had put plywood under the porch and did a little bit of insulation, but still left a big void there. Well, the bees, of course, as ingenuity as they are, found the hole and moved up in there. These bees had probably been there for a couple of months, but really nice big colony. This thing was probably the size of 2 or 3 basketballs. But we were able to go in there, take the plywood off the bottom of the porch, and it was relatively easy to access them. Stand there and just remove the pieces of comb as we went through it. But really typical kind of bee removal that we see.
Let's go to the next slide. Bobby, tell us a little bit about this one. This is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this is probably, I would say, the second most common place that we find bees. This is actually the soffit or the overhang of the house. And there again, we get calls all the time where they're going in right at the top edge of the soffit where it meets the house, and people automatically think the bees are in the wall. And they're typically not. They're in this overhang because that overhang is there to let air circulate around the house so they don't put insulation in it. So there again, just like your floor joist, it's just a big wide open space. Now, granted, it's only about 3 or 4 inches tall, but it can be 18 or 20 feet long. So these bees had moved in right beside the brick and the siding there and just started down the soffit and started building, and very nice colony, very well built.
Well, I have a question on this video, or not video, this picture is they have a little bit of a wave to the comb.
Certainly.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the comb that you see most often. Is it straight or is it wavy? Tell us a little bit what you normally see on something like that there.
So it's pretty interesting. In most of the time, it is built straight. Every now and then there'll be something in the way. Like a lot of times you'll have pipes or electrical lines, or I've even found dead squirrels and mice and stuff and they will build right around it that will give a wave to, the first piece of comb. And then, of course, it's like farming. If you get a wave in the first one, you get a wave in every one past that. But generally speaking, they do build fairly straight comb. And then sometimes it's across the joist. Sometimes it's the length of them. It just totally depends. That might be a good research to figure out what causes them to build in which direction. So
I've even seen them look like a brain of sorts, where they're round. And I don't know what caused that roundedness to begin with.
Exactly.
But you look at it and you go, wow, how do they do what they do?
Yeah, it really is fascinating when you look at that kind of stuff. I've even had pieces of comb in the shape of Florida. It's crazy the shapes and directions they will build stuff. And I've had them build in one direction for half of the comb, and then the other half of the comb is built in the other direction. It's just kind of no rhyme or reason as to what they're doing, but they're a whole lot smarter than we are. They know what they need. So,
well, you're on call right now. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All the time.
I've got a video from my Uncle Pete.
So, Ray, that's kind of like that very first picture that we talked about that I gave to you. That's a typical bay window. And just like where you saw that bee going in right there at the corner of the metal, with that situation, I can almost guarantee you without looking at it with a thermal camera that they're in the top of that bay window. Now, some of the challenges you're going to have with it is that it is a metal top roof. When it's sheet metal like that, it's a little more challenging. Typically, I like to go from the inside of the house to get to them. So there are some sheet metals you can take off, but generally I don't like to because it's a little more challenging to do. So there's some other avenues you can get to.
Because if you bend that metal, you can't bend it back to where it used to be.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, well, very good. Now we have another video on the inside of the house of this neighbor's house, and you'll see that there's a stain mark. So take a look at it and tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah. So what that looks like is possibly what's going on is the colony that was living there has died off for whatever reason. And, unmanaged colonies face so many challenges now with honeybees, with pests and diseases that they have to deal with. It's not uncommon for an unmanaged colony in a house to die off on its own. Well, then if there's honey and that kind of stuff left there, we do have a lot of pests that will move in and start eating on that honeycomb, which will cause the comb to break apart, of course, fall onto the sheetrock and start leaking through. So it's not uncommon in a colony that has died on its own to see stains like that. So it's not necessarily a water leak in the roof, but it's the possibility. And of course, you don't know until you open up the ceiling and see if it's in fact honey on the ceiling. But just by the amount of traffic that's on the outside of the house in that first video, I would lean towards it's probably a colony that has died out. And that's what they're starting to see is some staining from the, left honeycomb in there.
So if you were doing this house call, and would you bring out a thermal meter or scope and see what's going on?
One of the best tools that we have gotten in this business, of course, is FLIR technology or infrared technology for us. I've actually got 4 different cameras, a couple that hook to my phone and then a handheld device as well. But bees, by the nature of bees, generate enough heat that we can see the temperature difference inside of a house. So that is absolutely one of the very first steps I take when I show up to somebody's house. I'll break out that thermal camera and I can pinpoint exactly where the bees are and if there's bees in there at all. So it makes it a lot easier to make that determination of where they are and if they're there for sure and where we need to go or which direction we need to remove them from.
Is there a thermal sensor that you would recommend for the layperson like myself to put up there and see where the bees are and are not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of them out there on the market. They're the one that I use, not promoting one company over another, but FLIR or FLIR is the industry leader in the technology. And they make a little camera that you can attach to your phone. And it runs off of an app on your phone. It costs a couple $100.
Wow.
And I actually recommend them for beekeepers to do hive inspections with, late in the fall, early in the springtime, where you don't want to necessarily open up a colony. You can use a FLIR camera. So they're out there. You don't have to spend a ton of money on them, but the technology is well worth the investment.
Well, we're going to have you back in January
Certainly.
when there's nothing going on, and have you come out with your FLIR.
Absolutely.
And let's see what hives are really jam-packed full of bees and which ones probably aren't going to make it because they're so small of a colony.
Absolutely.
Now, Bobby, tell us a little bit about, now you've gotten the bees out of the house, and what do you do with them at that point?
So that's the common question, is where are these going to go? What are you going to do with these bees? And we've got 8 different bee yards scattered all the way from the North Georgia mountains down to halfway down the state. But generally the majority of them, I take them back home. I've got a pretty big apiary at the house, and we get them back into a beehive, just regular managed beehive, get them situated, get them started back over, feed them if we need to, treat them for mites, that kind of stuff if we need to, and just get them settled in. And then we donate them out. There's 48 clubs across the state, and we commonly get requests from them to donate them to them. So it's kind of our way of giving back to the bee community.
One question that comes to mind, you take these combs out of whatever structure, and it's got brood. Do you try to save that brood, or are you just going to get the bees shook off into a box and take them? How do you play that as a beekeeper?
So that's a great question. And it really depends on the time of the year. If it's early spring up till about June or so, I don't really reuse the comb, just because there's enough resources out, as far as nectar and stuff, so bees can rebuild fresh, clean comb in a hive. I always have a worry and a thought in the back of my head, not that they've done it, but there's the potential that a homeowner or a pest control company or somebody like that has sprayed something on those bees before they called us. So I always have that concern of having something like that in the wax. So if I can not reuse it, I don't. But if we get later in the season when they don't have as much resources to rebuild comb, I can rubber band it back into regular frames and the bees will reuse it.
Okay, so you will cut out the comb to fit into a frame, either a medium or a deep.
Exactly.
Probably mostly mediums.
Actually, I use pretty much all of my stuff as deep, just because it's easier for me, and in my operation, it's a lot easier.
And then you just put rubber bands, 2 or 3 or 4 rubber bands on it?
It just depends. Sometimes I get one piece of comb that fits the entire frame, and then sometimes you might make it up with 4 or 5 pieces. So, but typically you just kind of gauge and see, but 4 or 5 rubber bands generally will hold everything in. And it's really fascinating because you can rubber band a piece of comb into a frame and put it with the bees and come back the very next day, and they will already have attached that to the frames and start chewing the rubber bands out.
That was because you were feeding them during that time?
That, or that there's enough nectar out there that they can get it reestablished and reattached.
Well, very good. Bobby, thanks for coming by today, and best of luck with this business that you love, and take care, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Ray. I enjoyed it.
Okay, so let's take a look at carniolan honeybees. We've been selling carniolan honeybees for 5 or 6 years now, and been raising them as nukes in our nuke yards in years past. So let's take a look at what these carniolan bees are all about. First of all, they represent about 4% of the total hives here in the United States. The second thing that I would also mention is I would not recommend the carniolans to a new beekeeper, and more on that in just a minute. But let's take a look at them on this slide here. What do they look like? First of all, the worker bees have black and white bands on the abdomen. The queens will have a chocolate to dark brown abdomen with no bands. Carniolans can be much more defensive or aggressive. Let's just say you drop a frame, and as we all know, that does happen here and there. The Italians will not fly up in your face as much as the carniolans will. They will be on the attack mode if you drop a frame in the bee yard. So that is one of the main reasons why I would say a new beekeeper would not want to get started with carniolans. And, when when we talk about carniolans, they defend the hive much better on pests, whether it be another hive nearby, or if it would be a skunk or a raccoon, or even a bear. They're going to be much more aggressive. Now, that aggressiveness has a plus side to it. And one thing that I have found when I'm working with bees is the more aggressive the bee is, the better the nectar collection. And more collection of nectar equals more honey for us as beekeepers. So the aggressiveness is a positive in my book, but it can be a negative for a new beekeeper. Now, let's talk a little bit about the queens when they go into their brood production in the spring. Now, if we take a look at the Italians versus carniolans, the carniolans are going to be a lot slower and starting up in the spring. They're going to run about 2 to 3 weeks behind the Italian bees. But once that queen gets to laying her brood, it is very, very explosive. So it's very, very important that we as beekeepers that have carniolans do weekly inspections and thus get ahead of adding supers before it's too late and they start having queen cells ready to swarm. Now let's take a look at some of the other traits that are part of the carniolans. One is they fly on overcast days. That means when the Italians are cooped up in their hive, the carniolans are out flying and collecting nectar. And I count that as a positive trait for the carniolans. Now, as we just said earlier, the more nectar, the more honey. And when we take a look at colony to colony, side by side, one side being Italians and the one next to it is the carniolans are going to average on an annual type basis 13% more honey versus the Italian colonies. And that's over multiple years that we have measured that with the Italians versus the carniolans. Now, the next part is very, very critical, and that is they do very, very well in cooler climates. So anyone from North Carolina, if we were drawing a horizontal line from North Carolina over to Oklahoma and northward, the carniolans would be a very good bee to look at. Also, if you live on top of a mountain where you get 5, 10, 15 degrees cooler temperatures than down in the valley, I would highly recommend the carniolans too. Now, with that said, they do well during the winter in carrying through on the very coldest of cold weathers. And part of that reason is they have larger colonies. That's because the queen is laying a lot later in the summer and even into fall, and thus has a larger colony than what you would find with the Italians. So a larger colony equals more warmth within the hive, and warmth equals success getting through those cold winter months, say in Maine or in Michigan. Those areas are perfect for the carniolan bees. Now, when we look at carniolan queens and bee packages, there's not many sellers out there in the marketplace that offer carniolan packages or queens. So you do have to take that as a note to yourself, is that if you need a queen or a package, you need to order in advance. A prime example would be that we sell out of the carniolans typically by mid to late January. So got to keep that in mind when you're thinking about ordering carniolans or replacement queens for the upcoming season. So there you go. Carniolans front and center are some of the best bees that you can have in the colder regions that we serve.
As we roll right along here on Buzz TV, time for one of my favorite segments where we get to ask Ray, where you get to ask Ray. Of course, send in those questions, buzztv@mountainsweethoney.com. That's the email address that you'll use. Aubrey is cultivating all of the questions that are coming in, and we've got some good ones that we're going to get right to. Now, Ray, this comes from John, not too far away in Alpharetta, Georgia, and here's his question. When should I place the queen excluder into the hive? And I'm going to ask a little follow-up question. What is a queen excluder?
Okay. All right. Let's start with the basics on queen excluders. A queen excluder is what traps the queen below where the brood is so that she does not move up and lay eggs into where honey is being stored, because it's very, very hard to extract honey with brood still in there.
Is this a plastic device that
we
somehow...
have it in metal and in plastic? Some beekeepers like to dispose of them at the end of the season, so they buy the plastic, and thus they can start with a clean, fresh queen excluder in the following season.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when do you put it on? When do you take it off? That's a very, very good question on that side. All right, so we put it on right early in the spring before nectar becomes present. So you would put your brood box and your honey super, and then right after that, you would put the queen excluder on at that point. Now that queen excluder will stay on until you want to extract honey. And at that point, that's when everything north of that queen excluder doesn't have a queen in it, so you can be really quick on getting that super of honey off the hive and not have to worry about the queen being in there. Now, one of the issues that new beekeepers have is they leave that on year round. And if they do, what it will do is, well, let's back up. Bees create heat, and heat rises within the hive. So the bees are going to move up through late summer into the fall time. And this is what happens. The heat gets trapped up in the top. If the queen is left down below, there's a good chance when the first frost comes, it will kill her off.
And we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, because the bees are going to move up and she's going to be trapped down below. Now, we take the queen excluder off when we harvest the honey, after we've pulled those supers off. So that's when you put it off, and then you put it on in the springtime.
As Buzz TV continues, do you think we could do some footage out in the field of how to do this?
Yes, we are planning on having a weekly update on hives for Italians, Carniolans, Russian, and of course the Caucasian, which is our new bee that we're handling this year. So we're going to be giving live updates throughout a 52-week period from start to finish, and that will be on our website probably starting next month.
And before we get to the next question, just a quick reminder, when you subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Mountain Sweet Honey YouTube channel, and you put the word freebies there in the comments, you're automatically registered to win free packaged bees that we'll be announcing in a subsequent broadcast. I think as we mentioned, the Black Friday broadcast will make that announcement. So go to the YouTube channel, Mountain Sweet Honey, subscribe, then put freebies in the comment. Leave us a comment. You can even leave an Ask Ray question there as well, because we're looking on YouTube and Facebook as we gather all of these questions.
Very good.
Now, Sally, who's down in Orlando, says, can I place my hive on the ground?
Very good question. When you place the hive on the ground, you begin to trap moisture between the actual dirt or grass that's underneath it. And when it rains, it will go back up underneath the bottom board. And what you begin to do is you begin to foster all kinds of mold and bacteria on the outside of the hive. And also it begins to add more moisture on the inside of the hive. The other second technical problem that you run into on placing hives on the ground is flooding. So if you got 2-3 inches of rain that fall in a given hour, there's a good chance that hive is going to get flooded out. flooding is probably the number one problem with losing hives. Is people leave it on the ground, or a hurricane comes through, like Hurricane Ian, and even on a stand, they can be flooded out. So it's important to get your hive off the ground to reduce bacteria and mold that can bring those mold spores into the hive. Bees don't do very well in those conditions. Now, you can go into South Georgia and Florida and even in Louisiana and see them on the ground, but they're in higher ground that are not prone for flooding. And if you do have them on the ground, you're going to be replacing that bottom board.
Just because of rot.
Yeah. You're going to be seeing probably every 2 to 3 years having to replace that bottom board.
Makes sense. Cool.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sally. This is a question, Ray, that I've heard several people ask. Maybe this has something to do with the hurricane or just with the overall bee population. Is there going to be a honeybee shortage this year? And that comes from our good friend Jim over in Gadsden, Alabama.
Okay. We're keeping our fingers crossed at this point. We're waiting to hear some data coming out of the University of Florida on the how many hives were damaged in Hurricane Ian. We know when the hurricane hit Houston a number of years ago, there was a shortage of bees, and they went very, very quick that season. I think there is going to be some pressure on dates, especially. The later dates will probably remain open, but those will also sell out because just needing to get those bees back into a new hive and producing honey. And so I would say there's probably a 45% chance that there's going to be a shortage on honeybees this year. And it's mostly because the folks that have been hit in Florida so hard with Hurricane Ian, they're going to be taking this year to just get their homes back in place, and their hobby is going to take a back seat. Now, that begs the question about 2023, or 2024, excuse me, the next season after. I do think that there will be a shortage in 2024. All right.
And with this potentiality, how should that affect any decisions that people are making about getting bees?
Get your bees early.
Okay.
Do not wait until the first of the year to place your order for bees. Now, we do have a policy that we do have is that you can order your bees. We'll book it. If you decide by February the 1st that you don't want your bees, we'll give you a 100% refund, no questions asked.
Okay. And again, thank you to Mountain Sweet Honey for sponsoring Buzz TV. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, checking in. I've got family down there in the bayou.
Baton Rouge.
Yes. What type of wood is best for making a hive? That comes from Al again there in swamp country.
All right. This is a pretty unique question. I hear questions about using ironwood. I hear questions about poplar being used. The best wood to be used is a white pine. Now, if you use poplar or ironwood, they're so heavy. Just the box itself, it adds a lot more weight to the beekeeper and thus back problems down the road. So white pine is the preferred choice by most beekeepers because of how lightweight the wood is, and it still lasts a long time. The average deep that the brood would be in will get you probably 8 to 10 years worth of use before it has to be replaced. And then supers, because you take them off during honey production, then those are going to last 15 plus years on that.
Very good. Our final question, this is from Ben in Horsehead, and I'm not sure.
Horsehead's New York.
Okay, Horsehead's New York. He says, with this being an El Nino year,
Yes.
do you see delays with bee shipments?
There is a good chance. I would say there's probably a 60% chance. And this is all going to be subject to the cold weather getting out of the south in mid to late February. That is the time when queens are being reared and making their mating flights during that time. So we need 45-degree or warmer weather between February the 15th and the end of the month. And if that happens, then everything's good. But if we get a cold snap coming through where our queen breeders are having a question mark if they had those mating flights that are absolutely needed, then it could be delayed by 1 or 2 possible weeks.
All very good questions.
But we won't know on that, though, Brian, until we get right into February.
Okay. So just have to keep an eye on things. Thank you so much to everybody that sent in a question. All very good questions. BuzzTV@mountainsweethoney.com. That's the email address to ask your question, or right there in the chat, the comments on YouTube and Facebook. We'll be scouring those, collecting questions for some of our future broadcasts. So
let's keep Aubrey busy.
Yes, absolutely. Good stuff, guys. Appreciate it.
Hi, folks. It's our weekly flash sale. We all need to be feeding our bees right now nationwide. This week, we're offering Hive Alive pollen patties. Hive Alive is a great source of nutrition for your bees. These high-performance pollen patties offer 15% pollen from right here in the USA, and has over 15% protein, all natural, no animal protein, and a complete range of amino acids, trace minerals, and vitamins required for healthy colonies. Several studies have shown that Hive Alive increases brood and honey production. Our normal price is $48.95 a case. A case contains 10 pollen patties. Buzz TV price is $38.95, a savings of $10 per case. Simply go to our homepage, mountainsweethoney.com, look for the Buzz TV special, and click on that button. At checkout, you will use coupon code BuzzTV to get your $10 discount. This price is good through Sunday, November the 13th, 2022. We'll see you at the checkout.
Ray, I'm definitely going to have to pick up some of those Hive Alive pollen patties.
Is that on your list?
I told you it was a long list. It is now. If it wasn't before, it is on the list. And something that seems to be a question that's on a lot of people's list, I want to throw this at you real quick, is about proper hive placement. You got anything for us on the best
hold on just
setup?
A second here. Hold on. Okay, go on ahead and pull us up, Brian. All right, let's take a look at this slide. Right here we have the sun. We want to have as much sun coming on our hives, and the optimal is 12 to 13 hours of sun during the summer. You may be thinking, well, that's too hot. I live in Arizona and it gets 110, 120 degrees, or I'm in Florida and the humidity is high and the heat is at 100 degrees. That's okay. The bees are acclimated for as much sunlight and warmth that is going to be happening in your area. If they get too hot, they'll just come out here and what is called bearding and hang out and cool off on the outside of the hive. Now, let's take a look at the water source. The water source is very important for both summer and during the winter. During the summer, the bees will come out to hydrate and also to bring those water droplets and spew them inside the hive as the bees are moving their wings, creating natural air conditioning. Now, if we look at the prevailing northern winds during the winter months, they need protection from chilling out. So if you put an evergreen hedge or a wood fence, that would be very, very important to help keep the cold winds of the winter away from them. The next thing that we got to consider is is the access for a wheelbarrow or for a truck to back up to take off the honey supers from the hive and carrying them back to the house. So easy access is a must. We also need to look at good drainage. You know, these hives here are setting up on a hill, and that allows us as beekeepers to have good steady feet while we're working and managing our hives. Now, you would also note that if there's flood conditions here, we want to have these high enough so that they're not into a flood zone. And Brian, that's basically what this new beekeeper needs to be looking at when they place their hives.
Very helpful, especially as I'm now in that process that some others are in about where do I put my hive, which will be my first hive. One question that has popped up is about the neighbors. I'm sure they're going to see me setting up a hive. Should I proactively talk with them about what I'm doing, or do you have any thoughts about being a good neighbor?
Yeah, being a good neighbor and a beekeeper go hand in hand. And one of the things that I did when I first got started is I spoke to my neighbors and said, "Hey, do you guys like honey?" That was my intro to letting them know that I was going to be a beekeeper.
Better to use honey than vinegar,
Exactly.
as the old saying goes.
Exactly. So what I do every year is I offer them a honey bear full of honey and say, "Hey, this came out of this neighborhood and I'd like to give it to you."
All right.
So it's plenty of goodwill right on the front end. And those neighbors, 95% of our neighbors are going to say, "Oh, I haven't seen honeybees in a long time," or "I get honey." And so those kind of things are what really build to great relationships with our neighbors and with our honeybees.
I think somebody in my neighborhood does have honeybees because I've noticed more this year than ever before.
Sure.
But nobody's brought me any honey yet. So if you're watching this in my neighborhood, you know where to find me, and I'd love to have some neighborhood honey. My second question is, once you find that optimal placement, should you think about any other things to go in the area, such as flowers or foliage, anything that helps with the pollination process?
I would think the first thing that you just got to do as a new beekeeper is get your bees, keep them healthy, and get ready for that first winter coming through. And then during that first winter, you can start looking at bee balm or even poplar trees that you could put out there, or privet. There's so many different things that you can put out there. But generally speaking, Brian, it's wildflower honey is what you're going to be producing in your backyard, because it's going to take nectar from 100 different sources, and the bees are going to bring it in. They're going to get that turned into honey, and then that's something that you'll be able to enjoy.
Good. If my memory serves correct, you did a much more extensive breakdown on this during the Beekeepers boot camp, and we have that video just about to be available. Any updates on the video you'd like to share?
Well, the video should be up and running, and check it out, folks. I give an introduction, and it's a great course that we've really taken from an all-day class right into the absolute basics and cut out a lot of the fluff that would be there, even with questions and answers.
Yeah, so keep an eye on mountainsweethoney.com. Again, thank you to those guys for sponsoring the show, and thanks, Ray, for the good insights. Friends, that wraps up this edition of Buzz TV. Brian Race and Ray Sivitz. And one more time, that flash sale, Hive Alive. Your bees love it. It's good for them. And we've got that incredible deal. Ray, one more time, would you explain what they're getting? It's $10 off, but
$10 off.
Tell us more about Hive Alive.
This is what you feed your bees this time of the year to keep their gut in good health, and also to feed them during this critical time. The pollen just does really wonders for your bees.
Simple. Go to mountainsweethoney.com, scroll down, look for the Buzz TV flash sale, and then at checkout, there's a chance or the opportunity that you just type in Buzz TV as your coupon. When you apply that, it's going to instantly just take $10 off of that order. So it goes down from like $48.95 to $38.95. And that's good right on through this Sunday. So if you're watching the replay, I hope you're watching pretty soon after we drop the replay, because by time the 13th we said, is that what this Sunday is going to be? So by time it's November 13th, 2022, that flash sale wraps up. And before we wrap up, what's headed our way Black Friday? I know you told us
we got Black Friday
the
coming
smoker.
at us. Yeah, the smokers. We're going to have the
what
smokers.
What else?
Now you're as bad as a little kid during Christmas.
Listen, I've got to buy a lot of things to get my beekeeping journey going, and I want to know what else besides
keep working on your list.
The smoker.
All right, keep working on your list.
I got it.
Now, Brian, one thing that we do have coming on up is Dr. Jamie Ellis from the University of Florida, and we've got several segments we're going to do with him, and he's going to be teaching us on several different bee items on that there. Now, those that don't know about the University of Florida, the entomology department, there's over 70
it's large
professors. It is the largest entomology group at the university level in the United States. And Jamie is one of their shining stars from the University of Florida. And we also want to thank Bobby Chaisson.
Yeah, wasn't that a fun interview?
Yeah, Bobby, he's a character.
Georgia bee removal.
That's correct. And I want to thank Bobby for his time here with us today. And Brian, I'm going to see you on Black Friday.
You will, 9 a.m.
And
YouTube, Facebook, mountainsweethoney.com, 3 ways to be one of the fortunate few that get some of these deals.
How are we giving away the honeybees?
Oh, that's right. The package bees that we are giving away. And those are the Italians, right?
Yes,
we're doing the Italians.
honeybees.
And the simple way to do that is to go to our YouTube channel for Mountain Sweet Honey. So just type in Mountain Sweet Honey in the search, find us there, make sure you subscribe. And then in the comments section, free bees. You could say something as easy as, I want free bees. I hope to win free bees.
Not I want my MTV.
Not I want my MTV. I want my free.
bees.
I'm going to have to get the music department started on putting together some great instrumentation and video for that. I want my free V's on Buzz TV. So make sure you do that, because we do announce the winner of the package of bees coming up Black Friday, when we will see you next.
Folks, get your list together like Brian. I know he's still sharpening his pen a little bit and getting
I'm still just trying to figure it out.
All right, very good.
But I got an expert to help me.
All right, folks, have a great week.
See ya. Bye.